disparate elements of what was then the British India were to come together to form a nation. And the kind of diverse elements that were existing in India at that point in time, many of them at odds with each other, need to be brought together. And that was an exceptional exercise that the Constituent Assembly did. An exercise which required a lot of compromises. Because there is no country in the world with the diversity that exists in India. And they had to be brought together into a state which would last for a long, long time as a unit. And so therefore it was not an easy exercise at all. We had, of course, the foundation of it was the 1935 Act, which really laid the basis of what the Constitution was going to be. And those in the Constituent Assembly knew how the 1935 Act was functioning, and they actually, most of it was borrowed from the 1935 Act. But the moral underpinnings of the Constitution are all set out in the preamble of the Constitution. And it talks about justice, political, social, and economic. The freedom of expression, faith, speech, religion. Talks about the dignity of the individual, the unity of the nation. Talks about fraternity. These are the moral underpinnings of the Constitution, and in a sense we all have actually moved far away from them. There is no political justice in this country. Social justice, actually people cry for social justice. And the economy of the country is being run by a couple of people. So there's no economic justice. And we're living, if I would want to believe somebody, in Amrit Kal. But andhere mein reh rahe hain. That's what the reality is. Now let me give you some examples, because it's best to tell you what's happening in our country. I filed a petition the other day. You see, in the Mewat region, which is part of Rajasthan and part of Haryana, all these horrible killings are taking place. And I filed a petition saying that, look, in the Mewat region, the court should look at the kind of incidents of violence that have taken place. And I filed an Article 32 petition. It went before two distinguished judges. And the judge said to me, Mr. Sibal, why you've come under the Article 32? Because I said, if you don't interfere, I'm afraid in a month or so something very serious is going to happen. He said, no, nothing of the sort. You move the High Court. And new happened after that. Now, why did I go to Supreme Court? It's something that you'll all be shocked about. Probably you don't know. There's a law in Haryana which is against cow slaughter. And under the law, they set up a committee in terms of which, and most of the committee is constituted by people who are in government. But that committee can actually delegate police powers to private persons. Actually delegate police powers to private persons. So you can waylay anybody. And if you find that there is some trade in cows going on or something like that, you can arrest him, you can do what you like. So I challenged that provision in the Supreme Court. And I said, how can police powers be given? And the person who was doing these acts was that Monu Manesar. He's been doing all this through that delegated power. The court said, go back to the High Court. And we had no. What am I trying to tell you? That the political class in this country is far removed from the moral underpinnings of our Constitution. Unless we change the politics of this country, nothing will change. And in that context, the slogan of, or the vision of solidarity, but how do you make people, get people together? That's perhaps the biggest challenge that we have. Look at the way look at the way Parliament is functioning today. You know that as a matter of law in the finance bill, only finance measures are to be passed. But they amend laws in the country which have nothing to do with the finance bill and get them passed in Parliament. And you can't challenge them because it is part of the budget. You challenge it in Supreme Court, the matter is referred to 9 judges and it's never heard. In Parliament, there is no longer any debate for the simple reason that Parliament is not allowed to function because the Treasury benches and the opposition don't get together to find a via media as to how to move forward. And the reason is simple, those in power. It's always the case, whether it's the family or it's a kasbah or a society, it's those in power who have to be more generous towards the weak. That's how society functions. If the father of the house doesn't let go, there's big conflict. So you have to let go. And I was saying the other day in another forum, the biggest flaw in our politics, in our parliamentary democracy, is the concept of a whip. Why do I say that? So when I was a member of the Congress Party, I had to follow exactly what the Congress Party told me to do. Now, if you look at any other functioning democracy in the world, take the United States of America, it is the Republicans who have to reach out to the Democrats. I mean, you want to pass an Obama health bill, you'll have to actually reach out to Republicans because there's no concept of a whip. So there's a constant dialogue between the Treasury benches and the opposition. And you can seek the support of the opposition without being disqualified from the Senate or from the House of Representatives. If you look at the UK, it's exactly the same. The Conservative Party will reach out to Labour and vice versa. There is no concept of a whip. You will not be disqualified. If you make a speech in Parliament against your Prime Minister, you will not be disqualified. You will not be thrown out of the House. You cannot lose your seat. But in our parliamentary democracy, if I say something against the leader, then there will be a whip issued. I'm violating the whip, and under 2(1)(a) of the 10th schedule, I'll be disqualified. So what do you have? A parliamentary democracy where members of parliament are not allowed to speak. You have a parliamentary democracy where a member of parliament cannot voice his opinion because he will lose his membership. What kind of constitution do we have? What kind of parliamentary system of democracy do we have? I have been elected by the people to speak my mind, and I cannot speak my mind because I will lose my seat and there'll be another election. That's the bane of our democracy. Now, if you don't have the whip, then as it is, if members of the Legislative Assembly can be bought over against the verdict of the people, then there'd be Ayaram, Gairams every day. So where do we go? Because people are willing to be bought over, and sometimes it's not for a very small price. I mean, which democracy in the world have you seen elected governments being thrown out because members of the party which are ruling are willing to be bought over for a price? Which country have you seen that? You're elected for a period of 5 years, and all the governments that are now installed, whether they're in Madhya Pradesh or in Maharashtra, are all illegal dispositions. They have no legal authority under the Constitution to be there. And no court will look into it. No ED will investigate it. No CBI will file a charge sheet. So what do? And you talked about adult suffrage. What's the adult suffrage you're talking about? On January 1, on any given year, the rolls are finalized. If you have an election in May, and if the election date is May 12, on May 11, depending on the area that you're located in, and depending on who is in power, hundreds of people's names will be deleted from the electoral roll. So that when they go to vote, having the Aadhaar card, they will say, your name is not here. So in that particular street, where the opposition is majority, those names will be deleted. And you will not be allowed to vote. And there is no redressal. And the mechanism follows is that after January 1 on any given year, anybody can raise an objection, quay anybody else, that he has left his home. Right? So you raise an objection that such and such person living in such and such house on my street is no longer living there. That will be put on the notice board. Nobody will know whether it's on the notice board. These fellows will delete the name from the electoral roll, and that we call adult suffrage. What are we talking about? This is how the Constitution is working. What about your fundamental rights? The right to speech. You know the 3 criminal laws that have been introduced there, you'd be shocked to know what they contain. Earlier, a police officer can keep you in police custody during the first 15 days of your arrest. The moment he arrests you, in the next 15 days, you can be in police custody. You have to be produced before the magistrate. The magistrate may grant 3 days custody, 4 days custody, but the maximum is 15 days. Okay? Now under the new bill, and they say this is, we're moving away from the colonial era. Now what they have said is, now a police officer can keep you in custody for 60 or 90 days. That's the new amendment. 60 days for some offenses, 90 days for other offenses. That's giving police powers the extent, and you know what the police does when it keeps you in custody. This is one great sort of progressive step that is touted as moving away from the British era. Then they have abolished sedition, but they have included several paragraphs on what is the security of the state. So under those provisions, which are far broader than sedition, you can be charged for security of the state for making a speech. It's much worse than the British era. Much, much worse. Then they have provisions that if Parliament has passed a law and more than 5 people protest it, you're barred from doing that. This is targeting the farmers' agitation that took place. So you won't be able to protest anymore if these criminal laws are passed. A person who gives his space in his house for those people to reside who have protested, he will be proceeded against. So let's not fool ourselves. We're not living in a democracy. And if you add that with the culture of hate, then it's an entirely different brew. So where do we go from here? Let me tell you a very interesting fact which probably also you don't know. Under our constitution, what happens is that in many of these instances where governments are taken over, and people are bought over, sometimes about 30 people from one party will resign all of a sudden. They'll go to the speaker and say, here's my resignation. So once the 30 people from a political party resign, naturally that party will become minority. Because there's an understanding with those who want to throw the elected government in power that they will join that party. So there's a provision in the Constitution called 164 capital 1B, which says that yes, once you resign and join another party, you will not be a member of the legislative party till your term is over or till a fresh election takes place, whichever is earlier. So you resign, 30 of you resign, the government falls, there are fresh elections, all 30 are given ticket, all 30 get elected, and a new government is formed. And that's provided by the Constitution. In other words, the Constitution is giving credence to an immoral act. That's how we are working our Constitution. And that's what Ambedkar said, forget, I'm giving you a great Constitution, but what about the guys who are going to work it? That's what Learned Hand said. He said, freedom lives in the hearts of men. When it dies there, you cannot revive it. And I blame ourselves that we sit here, we have debates, but we're not willing to stand up. Which middle class person is willing to stand up? Nobody. I find it difficult for lawyers to stand up, because everybody feels that why should I be the one to speak my mind? If you don't speak your mind, then you will see what is happening in our country. The poor can't speak because they have no means to speak. Their votes are either bought or manipulated. They have not seen it any better, quite frankly. Right from 1950 till date, you may have reduced poverty when you talk about numbers, but the level of poverty comparatively is the same. So the solution ultimately is that it's the people who will decide what's going to happen. And once the people are in a position that they feel there is nothing else we can do except to change this, then only change will come. No political party, according to me, has the capacity to change the system, given the fact that every institution in this country is completely captured. And the real issues before the court are not being heard. You have the electoral bond issue, which is not heard. There are so many other issues. Now they are changing the law. They say when the election commissioners are going to be appointed, the Chief Justice will be out of the panel. This is after 5 judges of the Supreme Court have held that no, this is how it should be done. So they defy court's orders. The same thing has happened in Delhi. The courts gave 2 judgments in favor of this government, the Delhi government. They've now brought in an ordinance. That's been, of course, now delayed because Jammu and Kashmir is being argued. So that will not be heard for a long time, and then 2024 will come. What we need is a new vision for India, not a common minimum program. Forget the Constitution for the moment. Let's have a new vision for India. What different will we do? That is what the opposition must tell the people of this country. What will we do for you if we come to power? Why should every teacher in this country not get a minimum salary of 50,000 rupees? They are the ones who will build the nation. Why shouldn't the best minds come to the teaching profession? Why should education be a federal subject? Why should it be in the concurrent list? It should be in the state list. Why should not, through the Finance Commission, every government or every state or all the states get at least 42% of all the finances in this country? They rob them of the finances because they have cesses which only go to the Union of India and the Union budget. These are changes that we want. Why should there be only a Supreme Court in Delhi? Why should there not be 4 regional courts of appeal? Why should a man from Arunachal have to travel to Delhi? He just cannot afford it. Why should there be 4 courts, regional courts of appeal, and 1 constitutional court? At the moment, every judge sits separately. I mean, 2 or 3 judges sit together. And if you have more than 30 judges, there are so many Supreme Courts. Every judgment is on behalf of all the 30 odd judges. But they differ in their worldview. These are basic changes that we want. We can't afford to allow our nation and our people, their dignity to be destroyed in this fashion without raising our voice. तो मैं कवि तो हूँ नहीं, लेकिन कुछ पंक्तियाँ मैं भी लिखता हूँ। तो ऐसे आपको सुना भी देता हूँ। It says मंजिल पे पहुँच के करूँगा क्या? मंजिल पे पहुँच के करूँगा क्या? वहाँ से वापस भी आना लाजमी है। मंजिल पे पहुँच के करूँगा क्या? वहाँ से वापस भी आना लाजमी है। ऐसा नशा के छोड़ कर करूँगा क्या? ऐसा नशा के छोड़ कर करूँगा क्या? मैं खाने का दोस्ताना लाजमी है। मैं खाने का दोस्ताना लाजमी है। दूर होकर भी पता करूँगा क्या? दूर होकर भी पता करूँगा क्या? तेरे शहर में घर बसाना लाजमी है। अपना बना के तूने अब ठुकरा दिया। अपना बना के तूने अब ठुकरा दिया। फिर भी तुझको अपना बनाना लाजमी है। फिर भी तुझको अपना बनाना लाजमी है। गली गली में ये जो आग जल रही है, उस आग को हमें बुझाना लाजमी है। खुदा के वास्ते इस दहशती को छोड़ दे तू। ये गुलसिता उजाड़ना क्या लाजमी है।